The first thing Eleanor Blackthorn felt was the bite of cold iron against her wrist, and the second was the terrifying truth that she had no memory of how she ended up chained beneath the ruined windmill on the edge of Dustfall Ridge. A single lantern burned several feet away, its flame flickering wild in the draft that carried the smell of dust, sagebrush, and approaching night. The wooden blades of the windmill creaked with every gust, sounding like the groan of something ancient and dying. Eleanor's breath came sharp and uneven. Her wrists were bound to a rusted support beam, her ankles pinned by another chain. Whoever had dragged her here had meant for her to stay. But why? Her head throbbed like she'd been struck. She blinked through the dark, trying to piece together memories: her ranch, her horse Ember, the letters she'd been receiving from a man who claimed to know the truth about her husband's disappearance, and then nothing but shadow. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Hello? Anyone here?" Only the wind answered. Eleanor was 30, but the last 3 years had aged her twice that year spent searching for her missing husband, Samuel, a man who rode into the mountains one autumn morning and never returned. Folks said she should move on, but she refused. Samuel had been steady, gentle, a man who never once broke a promise. For him to vanish without a word never sat right with her soul. A soft crunch outside, the sound of boots on brittle ground, jerked her alert. Her pulse hammered. She pressed her back against the beam, pulling instinctively against the chains even though they scraped skin from her wrists. Then she saw him. A tall silhouette stepped into the lantern's weak glow, outlined by the dying sunset. The figure was broad-shouldered, silent, and distinctly Apache. He wore a bone-beaded necklace, his dark hair tied back with rawhide, and he moved with a predator's calm awareness. He was not the man who had chained her here. She felt that instantly. Whoever this stranger was, his presence didn't carry the same sour intent as the one who had dragged her into this forsaken ruin. Still, fear coiled tight in her stomach. He lifted the lantern and let the light fall fully across her face. His expression didn't change, but his eyes, dark, steady, assessing, held something that unnerved her. Not cruelty, not pity. Something like recognition. "You should not be here," he said, his voice low and accented by the rhythms of his people. Eleanor swallowed hard. "Believe me, I didn't come by choice." He stepped closer. She flinched. He paused, raising both hands slowly to show he meant no harm. "I am Koda," he said. "I tracked the one who brought you." His eyes narrowed as he studied the metal cuffs around her wrists. He intended something wicked. Eleanor's heart pounded. Do you know him? Who is he? Why would he take me?" Koda didn't answer. Instead, he crouched and inspected the locking mechanism. The lantern light touched the scars. Along his forearms, thin, silvery lines that spoke of battles fought long before today. "Koda," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "I don't know what he wants, but I need to get out before he comes back." He glanced up. "He will not return tonight." "How do you know?" His jaw tightened. "Because I saw his trail heading toward Carrion Pass. A coward's route. But he will come back once the moon rises. Men like him always return to claim what they think belongs to them." Eleanor felt her blood run cold. Claim? Koda did not elaborate. Instead, he pulled a small iron tool from his belt and began working at the shackle. Each scrape of metal echoed through the hollow windmill. Every second stretched unbearably thin. "You are not the first woman he has taken," Koda murmured. Eleanor's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, the old windmill's door slammed in the wind, only it wasn't the wind. Heavy footsteps crunched outside. A man's ragged breathing carried through the gaps in the wood. Koda's eyes sharpened. "They are too soon," he whispered. Eleanor froze. But he had already risen to his feet, placing himself. Between her and the doorway, shoulders squared, every muscle steady as stone. Outside, a gravelly voice growled, Bring her out, Apache. She's mine. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. And Koda quietly said, No, she is not. The door rattled again, harder this time, as though someone leaned their full weight against it. Dust drifted from the rafters. Eleanor's pulse thrashed in her throat. Koda stood motionless, shoulders squared, gaze fixed on the doorway like a wolf ready to spring. The man outside spat, his voice rasping with alcohol and arrogance. You hear me, Apache? Step aside. The woman's mine. I paid for her. Eleanor's breath snagged. Paid? Her mind reeled. Who would sell her? And why? Koda didn't move. She belongs to no man, he replied, calm yet edged like flint. A harsh laugh scraped through the cracks. You think you can stop me? I got 2 more men outside. You open this door before things get ugly. Koda's jaw flexed. They are already ugly. He turned his head just enough to meet Eleanor's eyes. His calm steadied her trembling hands, even as fear burned cold through her veins. When I move, he murmured, you keep low. The chains, do they hurt you? Only when I pull too hard, she whispered. Her wrists were raw, but she lied about the pain. What good was truth right now? Koda's gaze softened an instant. I will free you soon. Trust me. The door exploded inward. Wood splintered, crashing against the wall. The lantern sputtered, shadows leaping wildly. The first man stormed in broad, filthy, his beard tangled with dirt. His eyes glinted with something poisonous when they landed on Eleanor. Behind him, 2 others lingered in the broken doorway, silhouettes against the dying light. There she is, the lead man sneered. Now move aside, Apache. I bought her fair. Eleanor felt her stomach twist. Bought me from who? She demanded, voice shaking. His smile was a rotten fang. From your dear husband, Samuel Blackthorn. He sold you for $30 and a bottle of whiskey. The world tilted. A ringing filled her ears. No, she whispered. Your lying Samuel would never. Koda stepped forward like a shifting shadow. You speak poison. Do not pollute this place further. The man snarled. She's mine. Contract says so. He held up a scrap of paper, creased and stained. Samuel's handwriting. Looks like he didn't love you as much as you thought. Eleanor's breath collapsed inside her. She wanted to deny it, scream it wasn't true, but the paper the signature tore through her like a blade. Samuel. Why? How? Her thoughts spun wildly but snapped back to the present as Koda moved. Fast. His fist hit the lead, man's jaw with a crack like breaking timber. The man staggered backward, crashing into the second outlaw behind him. The third drew a knife, lunging. Koda pivoted, catching the attacker's arm and twisting hard. The knife fell. Koda kicked it away, sending it skittering across the windmill floor. You're dead, Apache. One outlaw roared, grabbing a rusted tool from the wall. Koda ducked a swing and slammed his shoulder into the man's ribs. The outlaw collapsed with a wheeze, the wind knocked out of him. The leader recovered, fury twisting his features. He charged Koda, slamming him into one of the old support beams. Wood cracked. Dust rained. Eleanor tugged frantically at her chains, her wrists burning. Koda, but he didn't fall. With a grunt, he shoved the man back, delivered a hard knee to his stomach, then an elbow to his jaw. The leader dropped to one knee, cursing. The other outlaws scrambled to their feet, fear flickering in their eyes. This ain't worth it, one muttered. Let's go, he's not human, but the leader snarled. Get her. She's worth more than you 2 combined. He lunged toward Eleanor. No. She cried, pressing back against the beam. But before his hand reached her, Koda intercepted him, grabbing his collar and hurling him across the floor. The man hit the ground with a thud, groaning. Silence fell except for ragged breathing. The two other outlaws bolted out the door, disappearing into the fading light. Their footsteps faded until there was nothing left but the slow creak of the windmill's blades turning overhead. Koda exhaled deeply, sweat glistening on his brow. "It is over for now," he said. "But they will return once they bring more men." Eleanor shook, her whole body trembling. What he said? About Samuel. Koda knelt beside her, working at the shackle once more. Lies are a coward's shield. Do not take them into your heart until truth is known. The chain clicked. Her right hand came free. She gasped at the sudden relief. Koda met her eyes again steady, grounding. "You are not alone now, Eleanor Blackthorn. We leave before night swallows this place." But as the final shackle loosened, a chilling realization struck her. If that contract was real, someone she loved had betrayed her long before the chains ever did. The desert night fell fast too fast. By the time Koda and Eleanor stepped out of the ruined windmill, the horizon had bled from copper to indigo, and the first stars flickered faintly overhead like cold pinpricks of warning. The wind carried the smell of mesquite and something else, something metallic, sharp, almost like fear. Eleanor leaned against the doorway for balance. Her legs trembled from hours of being chained, and her wrists throbbed where the iron cuffs had bruised her skin. Koda noticed the way she winced and paused in front of her. "You can walk?" he asked quietly. "I'll manage," she whispered, though every step felt like needles up her calves. Koda studied her, his gaze steady, assessing. "We must move. The men will bring more with them. They will not accept their failure." A shudder rolled through her. "Why me? Why go through all this trouble?" Koda didn't answer right away. He scanned the darkening desert, eyes narrowing as if listening to something she couldn't hear. Some men do wicked things not for reason, but for hunger. That wasn't an answer, but maybe it was the only one she'd get. He motioned for her to follow him along a barely visible trail heading toward the jagged silhouettes of canyon walls. She stumbled behind him, trying to keep her breathing steady. The silence stretched long until Eleanor finally spoke again, her voice thin. "That paper he held up. The signature." Her throat tightened painfully. "It looked like Samuel's. I know his handwriting like I know my own." Koda stopped walking. The sudden halt made her nearly bump into him. He turned, his expression unreadable in the half-light. Sometimes a man's hand is forced to write things he does not choose. Eleanor swallowed. And sometimes men choose to do the unforgivable. "Do not decide truth when your heart is wounded," he said. "A wounded heart sees only one path." "But what if that path is the true one?" she countered. Koda's jaw worked, but he said nothing. He resumed walking. They descended toward a narrow cut in the land, a dry wash lined with boulders and sagebrush. The canyon wall shielded them from the wind, but the shadows here were deep, heavy. Every crack of a twig made Eleanor's nerves jump. Koda moved with the ease of someone who had traveled this terrain his whole life. He paused often to listen, sometimes crouching to examine prints in the dirt. Eleanor couldn't read any of it, but the tension in his shoulders told her enough. Danger was nearby, maybe closer than she wanted to know. Finally, after nearly an hour of walking, they reached a sheltered alcove beneath an overhang of red stone. The rock curved protectively overhead like a hollowed ribcage. It was dark, but safe enough. Koda set down his pack. "We rest here." Eleanor sank against the smooth stone wall, her body aching, her mind even more so. "Koda, why were you following those men in the first place?" His hand stilled over a flint striker he'd taken out. "Because they stole someone from my people 4 nights ago." He met her gaze. "A woman." Her breath caught. "Oh, I'm sorry. Did you find her?" "Yes," he said quietly. "But not alive." Her chest constricted. "Koda, They left her in a ravine, he continued. Chained. As you were. Cold horror crawled up Eleanor's spine. Then that man, he's done this before? Many times, Koda said. Your taking was planned. You were watched long before tonight. Eleanor wrapped her arms around herself. Why me? I'm nobody. Koda shook his head. You are someone to those who hunt. They saw you alone, vulnerable, still searching for a man who vanished. Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut. Pain welled up in her chest. Samuel wouldn't have sold me. He wouldn't. Koda didn't answer. The fire he'd built flickered to life, shadows dancing across the canyon walls. After a long silence, he said, Tell me of him. She hesitated. Why? Because truth shows itself when spoken aloud. Eleanor stared into the flames. Memories surfaced: Samuel's gentle smile, the calluses on his hands, the way he always tied his boots twice because he said single knots were trouble waiting to happen. He was good, she whispered. Steady, not perfect, but good. He loved our ranch. Loved the quiet. The world weighed heavy on him sometimes, but he never put that weight on me. And then? Koda asked softly. And then one morning he saddled his horse and said he needed to check the northern fence. Her voice cracked. But he never came back. No tracks. No sign. Nothing. Koda leaned back, considering. Some disappearances are chosen. Others are taken. She stared at him, heart thudding fast. Do you think he was taken? By those men? Koda's silence was answer enough to send a chill through her. Before she could ask more, he lifted a hand, suddenly listening. Eleanor froze. From somewhere in the canyon floor below, a dog barked. Then another voice followed, men, voices getting closer. Koda's eyes sharpened. They have found our trail. Eleanor's heart stuttered. Koda, what do we do? He rose slowly, hand closing around the handle of his knife. We run, he said. And this time, Eleanor Blackthorn, they will not take you alive. The canyon walls funneled every sound, every footstep, every muttered word straight toward them. Eleanor pressed her back into the stone, breath shallow as panic rose thick in her throat. Koda extinguished the small fire with a swift sweep of sand and gestured sharply for her to crouch lower. Stay close behind me, he whispered, voice barely a breath. Eleanor nodded, though her entire body trembled. She had no weapon, no strength, nothing but the desperate hope that Koda's presence might keep her alive. He moved silently along the canyon wall, each step deliberate, controlled. Eleanor followed, her fingers brushing the stone for balance. The moonlight barely reached the canyon floor, turning the world into a maze of shadows. The barking dog grew louder. Men cursed as they navigated the narrow pathways. They came through here. Someone shouted, Find her before the boss does. He'll have our hides if we lose the woman again. Eleanor's stomach twisted. Again. As if she were some animal that slipped its leash. Koda paused at the mouth of the canyon's next bend, motioning for her to freeze. His head tilted, listening. Eleanor strained to hear what he did, but she caught only the distant crunch of boots on sand. Then closer, a soft metallic clink. A gun being cocked. Koda seized Eleanor's wrist and silently pulled her into a small recess carved naturally into the stone. The space was barely big enough for two people, but the darkness swallowed them whole. Eleanor's heart pounded so loudly she feared it would give them away. Koda leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. Do not speak. Do not move. Their bodies were inches apart, pressed into the cold rock as footsteps approached. One outlaw stopped just beyond their hiding place. Eleanor could see the outline of his boots under the moonlight. A dog sniffed the air, whining. Eleanor's lungs burned as she forced herself not to breathe too loudly. Boss says she's worth more alive, the outlaw muttered. Says her husband's still paying for her, even after she was sold. Eleanor felt as if someone had struck her in the chest. Koda's hand tightened around her wrist, anchoring her, steadying her, silently telling her not to break now. Another man joined the first. You sure Samuel Blackthorn wants her back? Looks to me like he was happy enough to hand her over. Boss claims Samuel's just scared she'd talk. That ranch of theirs. There's more to it than dust and fences. Something worth killing for. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. What did Samuel hide? Before she could unravel the thought, the dog suddenly growled low, throaty, dangerous. Its paws padded closer. Eleanor's breath hitched, terror clawing at her throat. Koda moved. So fast she didn't have time to gasp. He slipped from the shadows like a ghost, his arm looping around the nearest outlaw's neck, pulling him into a chokehold. The man thrashed, but Koda's grip was iron. Before the second outlaw could react, Koda hurled the first man into him, sending them tumbling down the sandy slope. Eleanor scrambled out of the hiding place as the dog lunged at Koda. It snapped, teeth flashing. Koda sidestepped, catching the dog by the scruff and gently pushing it aside. Go, he commanded to the animal in Apache, his voice firm, not cruel. To Eleanor's astonishment, the dog hesitated, then bolted into the night. The outlaws regained their footing, stumbling backward. It's him, run! One cried, but the other raised his gun. Koda! Eleanor shouted. The shot cracked like lightning. It echoed through the canyon. Birds scattered from the cliffs. Eleanor dropped to the ground instinctively. When she lifted her head, she saw Koda standing tall, unharmed, because the bullet had struck the rock inches behind him. He was already on the gunman. They collided hard. The outlaw swung wildly, but Koda moved with practiced precision. A sharp elbow, a sweep of his leg, and the man crashed to the earth, wheezing. The second outlaw fled into the darkness, boots thundering against stone. Koda grabbed the fallen man by the collar. Who hunts her? Who is your boss? The outlaw spit blood. You're dead tomorrow. Both of you. Boss already paid for her. Samuel gave her up. She's marked. Eleanor stepped forward, voice cracking. Why? Why me? What did Samuel owe you? The outlaw's smile was sickening. Ask your husband. If you ever find him. Koda's jaw clenched. In one swift motion, he struck the man's temple with the hilt of his knife, knocking him unconscious. Silence returned to the canyon, broken only by Eleanor's ragged breathing. Koda turned to her, his expression softened by concern. You are hurt? No, she whispered, though her heart felt as if it had been torn open again. But Koda, what are they talking about? Samuel didn't owe anyone anything. Koda touched her shoulder gently. Truth is a trail. We follow it. Eleanor swallowed hard. Where does that trail lead? Koda looked toward the distant mountains, where the night seemed deeper. To the one place they will not expect us to go, he said. Your ranch. Eleanor's chest tightened. To the truth? The night stretched endlessly across the desert, each shadow a phantom threatening from every ridge and boulder. Eleanor Blackthorn stumbled slightly as Koda guided her along a narrow ridgeline, her hands still raw from the chains, wrists burning, but her mind buzzing with questions she could barely voice. Koda, the men. Samuel, she whispered, her voice trembling against the cold wind. Why would Samuel, why would anyone sell me? Koda's dark eyes remained fixed ahead, scanning the horizon, every muscle taut with alertness. We will find the truth, he said calmly, though the edges of his jaw betrayed the tension he carried. But first, we survive this night. The desert floor dropped steeply below them, a patchwork of jagged rocks and thorny sagebrush. The wind carried a dry, metallic scent that Eleanor could not place, making her stomach twist. Somewhere in the distance an owl called, sharp and mournful, as if echoing her own unease. They descended carefully into a narrow wash, the canyon walls pressing in close on either side. Koda moved silently, like a shadow melting into the night. Eleanor tried to mimic him, but her boots slipped over loose sand. I'm sorry, she whispered. Koda glanced back briefly, expression unreadable. You are learning. Focus on the ground, not the fear. Her breath caught as a faint sound reached them, a footstep, careful and deliberate, trailing them through the rocks. Eleanor froze. They found us again, she said, voice low. No, Koda corrected, placing a hand on her shoulder. This is different. Listen. The sound of a horse's hooves, soft on sand, echoed from the canyon mouth ahead. Eleanor's heart lurched. Who? Koda's eyes narrowed. An ally or a trap? We'll know soon. A figure emerged from the moonlight, a lone rider atop a black stallion, wrapped in a dusty coat, hat low over his face. The horse snorted, pawing the ground nervously. Eleanor squinted, trying to make out the features, but the shadow obscured them. The rider stopped a few yards away, eyes scanning. Koda, the man called, voice deep, wary. I tracked the outlaws you sent fleeing. You've been busy. Koda relaxed fractionally but didn't lower his guard. And you are? Call me Harlan, the rider said. I know the men who took her. They're part of a larger operation, slavers, not simple thieves. They don't act alone. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Slavers? Harlan nodded grimly. They saw your wealth, your husband's lands. He may have been forced, threatened, or he may have made a terrible choice. Either way, the trail leads west into the Badlands. Dangerous country. Koda's eyes flicked to Eleanor. Eleanor Blackthorn, you must ride. You are faster on a horse than on foot, and night is no friend here. She shook her head. I can't. I don't know how to handle a horse like that. You have no choice, Koda said, voice sharp now. The men will return, and if we stay on foot, they will overtake us. Eleanor's fingers clenched. She had spent her life on the ranch, but never in flight like this, never under such threat. Her heart hammered with fear and determination in equal measure. Finally, she nodded. Harlan dismounted quickly, steadying her as she climbed onto the horse behind him. The leather was rough against her legs, the reins unfamiliar in her hands. But Harlan's calm presence steadied her nerves. Hold tight, he said. Koda will cover us. Koda stepped aside, his form a dark silhouette against the moonlight. Eleanor felt a strange pang of emotion, gratitude, awe, and a burgeoning trust she couldn't explain. Go, Koda commanded. The horse bolted, hooves thundering against stone and sand. Eleanor clung tightly, the wind whipping her hair, the night stretching endlessly around them. Behind them, Koda disappeared into the shadows, a lone figure standing between her and whatever dangers lay behind. As they rode, Eleanor's mind raced. Samuel. The paper, the signature, the whispers of betrayal. She felt a growing determination, a need not only to survive, but to uncover the truth of her husband's disappearance and the forces that had dragged her into this nightmare. Harlan guided the horse along a narrow trail, zigzagging to avoid open plains where the outlaws might have eyes. Eleanor's muscles burned, adrenaline coursing through her veins, yet she couldn't stop thinking about Koda, how he had fought, how he had protected her. A warrior unlike any man she had ever met, yet gentle in ways that made her pulse quicken unexpectedly. Hours passed, the desert a blur of sand, rocks, and moonlight. Finally, Harlan slowed, guiding the horse into a sheltered alcove beneath a cluster of mesquite trees. Eleanor slid down, knees shaking, grateful for solid ground. Koda was already there waiting. His eyes scanned the surroundings, then softened as they settled on her. "You are safe for now," he said. Eleanor sank to the earth, exhausted, grateful, and unsettled all at once. Her voice was barely audible. "Koda, thank you. I don't know how to repay you." He shook his head. "Live, survive. The rest will follow." As the wind whispered through the mesquite leaves, Eleanor realized that survival was only the beginning and that the truth of her husband, the outlaws, and the desert's dark secrets awaited her on the horizon. She glanced at Koda. In the dark, under the stars, she felt the weight of their journey had only just begun. The first light of dawn was a pale slash across the horizon, barely illuminating the jagged desert peaks. Eleanor Blackthorn shivered, though it was not from cold. The night had been long, terrifying, and full of unseen threats. Her legs ached from riding behind Harlan, and every nerve in her body screamed from the adrenaline that refused to fade. Koda remained by the edge of their small mesquite-covered alcove, scanning the desert below with those dark, unyielding eyes. Even as the sky brightened, he did not relax. Danger, he had taught her, never truly slept. "They will come again," he said quietly, almost to himself, though Eleanor heard him. She nodded. "I know, but we can't keep running forever." Koda's gaze shifted to her. "No, that is true. But we must survive to uncover what they want and why." Eleanor's heart tightened. She thought again of Samuel, his disappearance, the forged paper, and the way the world seemed to have turned against her in the span of a single night. "Koda, do you think Samuel is alive?" He didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed on the horizon, muscles tense. Finally, he spoke, voice low and steady. "I do not know. But the men who took you act as if he owes them. That implies he is. Or he was recently." Her breath caught. The faint hope fluttered, fragile yet persistent, in her chest. Then we have to find him." Koda nodded once. "Yes, but first we must ensure your safety." He motioned for her to follow as he led her down the rocky slope into a narrow canyon that twisted like a snake through the desert. Eleanor followed, her hands brushing against the rough sandstone for balance, every step taking them further from the alcove and the men who had hunted her. Hours passed in tense silence. Eleanor had begun to understand the rhythm of Koda's movements, the way he stopped, listened, smelled the air. He seemed attuned to the desert itself, as though every gust of wind carried secrets he could interpret. She wished she could trust the land in the same way. At last, they reached a shallow cave partially hidden by boulders and scrub. Koda stopped. "We rest here. For now." Eleanor sank to the ground, the dry dirt gritty beneath her palms. "Koda, you've saved me more than once. How can I ever repay you?" He shook his head. "You survive. That is repayment enough." Her stomach tightened. "I can't help but wonder. If Samuel truly betrayed me, if he truly sold me." Koda placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Do not let speculation poison your heart. There is truth and there is fear. Fear is easy. Truth requires patience." She looked at him, and for a fleeting moment, Eleanor saw something more than the fierce warrior, the human beneath the strength. The man who fought not just with muscle, but with a code she couldn't yet name. "Koda, will you stay with me?" she asked softly. He met her gaze, and she saw nothing but resolve. "Until this is finished, until you are safe, I will not leave." A silence stretched between them, filled only by the whisper of the wind through the canyon. Eleanor's mind drifted briefly to Harlan, the man who had brought her this far, who had guided her on the horse through the night. He was an ally, certainly, but there was a gentleness in Koda that made her feel more protected than any mere man could. "Koda," she said after a long pause, "what happens if we find Samuel? And he's not the man I thought he was?" Koda's jaw tightened. "Then we face it, together. No one else can decide for you, Eleanor. Only you." Her chest felt heavy with the weight of truth and fear and hope all at once. The desert stretched around them, endless and unforgiving. She could almost feel the eyes of the men who had pursued her lurking in the distance, waiting for the moment to strike again. Koda broke the silence, crouching to examine footprints in the dirt. "They have tracked us this far, but their trail ends soon. We must leave before they regroup." Eleanor followed, standing and adjusting her hat against the early morning light. Every nerve in her body was alive, every sense sharpened by the threat of pursuit. She could see now the truth in Koda's movements, the precision in his gaze, the way his presence made her feel both grounded and daring at once. As they continued through the twisting canyon, Eleanor realized something she hadn't dared before. She trusted him. Not just to protect her from the men who hunted her, but to guide her through the darkness ahead, through whatever truth awaited about Samuel, about her husband's fate, and about the twisted forces that had stolen her from her life. Koda glanced back at her, voice quiet but firm. "The journey is not over, Eleanor Blackthorn, but you are alive, and that is the first step." Eleanor nodded, heart pounding, wind whipping her hair. She didn't know what lay ahead, whether Samuel would be alive or whether betrayal awaited, but for the first time in days, she felt a spark of hope. And standing beside her, silent, strong, unwavering, was Koda. The desert stretched endless before them, and they moved forward together into the unknown. The sun hung low over the Badlands, spilling molten light across jagged rock and endless stretches of dry sand. Eleanor Blackthorn's legs ached, her wrists still tender from the chains that had once bound her. But every step she took beside Koda was fueled by a mixture of fear, determination, and something else she refused to name. "We are close," Koda said, voice calm but edged with urgency. He scanned the horizon with piercing dark eyes, every muscle coiled and ready. "The men who took you, they hide in the canyon ahead. We must approach carefully." Eleanor swallowed hard, tightening her grip on the rifle she had borrowed from Harlan hours ago. She had never fired a gun before, but necessity had forced her hand. The weight was heavy, but it made her feel powerful, defiant. "What if they try to take me again?" she asked softly. Koda's jaw tightened. "They will not. Not if I stand here." The canyon narrowed as they descended, walls rising like ancient sentinels on either side. Eleanor's breath came fast, shallow, but Koda's presence grounded her. Every instinct, every movement of his body radiated lethal precision. She had never seen a man fight like him, not Samuel, not Harlan, not anyone. Koda was a force of nature, and he had chosen to protect her. Ahead, in a shadowed hollow between red rock cliffs, she saw them, two men, heavily armed, standing guard over a crude holding pen. Eleanor's heart froze. Inside the pen, chained to a wooden post, was another woman. Not her. She recognized the faint glimmer of panic and the ragged clothing as someone the men had captured earlier. "They took another," Eleanor whispered, voice trembling. "Yes," Koda said. "And we free her, then we confront your husband's truth." Eleanor blinked. "My husband?" Koda didn't answer yet. He crouched low, examining the ground. Then he gestured silently. "Follow my lead. Do not speak. Do not move until I signal." The two of them moved like shadows, creeping along the canyon walls, sand and pebbles shifting silently beneath their boots. Eleanor's pulse throbbed in her ears. Every nerve screamed to run, to hide, but she stayed in Koda's shadow, feeling the strange reassurance of his presence. When they were close enough, Koda's hand swept to the first guard. A flick of his wrist, a low grunt, and the man crumpled silently to the ground. Eleanor held her breath. The second guard spun, raising his rifle, but Koda was already moving. In a blur, he disarmed the man, sending the weapon clattering against the rocks. Eleanor felt her stomach tighten as the men were neutralized. The chains on the second woman clinked faintly as Koda knelt beside her, breaking the iron bonds. She stumbled out of the pen, trembling but alive. "Go," Koda said. "Move quickly to the ridgeline. I will cover you." The women ran together, hearts hammering, until they reached a safe alcove overlooking the canyon. Eleanor turned back, searching for Koda. He was already on the move, stepping lightly, eyes sharp, ready to confront anyone foolish enough to pursue. It was then she saw him standing in the sunlit hollow. And there, emerging from the shadows, was Samuel Blackthorn. His clothes were dusty, his hands roughened from travel, but his face was pale with guilt and fear. "Koda," Eleanor breathed, stepping forward instinctively. Samuel raised his hands, voice trembling. "Eleanor." Koda's dark eyes bore into him. "You sold her," he said, voice low, steady, like a steel blade. "I had no choice." Samuel's voice cracked. "They threatened the ranch, the cattle. They said if I didn't, then you tried to protect your life," Eleanor said, heart pounding. "But did you think of mine?" Samuel's shoulders sagged. I thought it would be temporary. I thought they would let me buy you back. You don't get to decide for me," Eleanor said, voice rising with controlled fury. "You left me chained alone to survive on fear and hope. And now you expect me to forgive?" Koda's gaze stayed fixed on Samuel, warning clear in his stance. Eleanor felt a strange surge of power. She did not have to forgive. She did not have to submit. She had survived. She had fought. Samuel lowered his eyes. I understand if you never forgive me." Eleanor took a slow, steady breath. She could feel the desert wind on her face, the sharp scent of sagebrush, the heat of the morning sun on her skin. She had survived men, chains, betrayal, and fear. She was no longer helpless. Koda stepped beside her, shoulder brushing hers. She felt grounded, protected, and free. Eleanor turned to Samuel one last time. "You will leave, and you will never return to me or my life." Samuel nodded silently, knowing the truth in her words. He turned and walked away, swallowed by the canyon. Eleanor exhaled, chest heaving. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, she felt the weight of fear lift. Koda's hand found hers, strong and steady. "You are safe," he said quietly. "I am," she replied, voice firm, carrying the strength of survival. "Because of you, but also because I refuse to be broken." Koda smiled faintly, the first warmth Eleanor had seen in his eyes. Together, they looked out over the canyon, the desert stretching endless before them. The sun climbed higher, painting the land in gold and fire. Eleanor Blackthorn, once chained and hunted, now stood free. And at her side, Koda, the Apache warrior who had risked everything, remained steadfast. The desert was vast, dangerous, and unforgiving, but she had survived it. She had survived him. And finally, for the first time, she felt unstoppable. The journey was over. The chains had fallen. The truth was hers to face. And she would never run again.